Hi class, are you ready to talk perceptions? Again, that's the main idea from chapter 4. I had mentioned in the intro video that it's a four-step, you can almost see my whole hand, four-step process that we usually work through in almost an instant. It really isn't a slow, deliberate process, but its impact is absolutely huge on our lives and our communication more specifically. So it's worth stopping, pausing, and reflecting to understand what it is we are doing whenever we encounter stimulus around us. The world just is constantly throwing messages at us. If you think about communication beyond just the words that we hear, but all that we see and hear around us that might not be language and might not be directed towards us, all of those are elements of communication. And it truly is a barrage. So we constantly are filtering and trying to make sense of the world and choosing what it is that we want to pay attention to. The perception making process gives us steps to describe all of that and just lets us understand better what it is that's going on in the world and in our lives when it comes to perceptions. So if you look at the four steps, the very first thing is this idea of selection. That's the first step of the process. It basically means that we choose what it is that we're going to pay attention to. I mentioned just a couple seconds ago that we are constantly barraged with lots of messages, and we literally need to filter or it would be maddening. We could not process absolutely everything that we encounter. We have a communication rich world, and it's rich to the point of actually causing overload if we try to make sense of everything. So we choose what's important, what is deserving of our time. And sometimes this is a very deliberate act, sometimes it's so accidental, or it has just become habit and routine because it's a healthy process. Think about when you're watching TV or streaming something online. If you are watching a show and then it's time for commercials, how easily do you tune out the commercials? Or you know that this is a break where you can run to the kitchen or grab a snack, more coffee for me if it's the morning. That is all related to this idea of selection. If there are a lot of people in a room, it's a gathering, there are 30 people, and a number of people have just found each other and they're having individual conversations or small group conversations, do you try to listen to all of them? Obviously not. It is something that is so natural and healthy, but we have a label for it, and that is selection. What is it that we want to select to pay attention to? That's where the word comes from. That's the first thing that we're doing, and we take it for granted, but it actually is frequently a deliberate step. So once we know what it is that we want to select on or choose to spend our efforts on and engage with, we have the second step of the perception making process, and that's organization. We constantly put things into categories to try to make sense of them. We have less to try to figure out if we think something is similar to something else. We use comparison all the time. So what does a category mean within the organization process? Well, it depends upon what organization scheme you're wanting to use. I'll throw out a couple of examples to try to illustrate this, because organization is honestly the step that isn't as clear as the others when most people encounter the four stages of the perception making process. So if I were to say that, I am going to make food today, it doesn't really reveal much at all. But when you hear the word food, what sorts of categories are you thinking? You haven't encountered me making food yet. I alluded to the fact that I like to cook and bake in last week's introduction video. But what does food mean? It's so open-ended. We try to narrow it down. We try to put things into categories in our organization process so we have a perception of what to expect, or we have made sense of what a term or phrase means. Some of the different things I might be making, I might make a dessert. I could make cookies, I could make a cake, I could make a pie, but I'm not going to do any of those things. The weather is a little bit damp and a little bit cold. I'm looking out my window and I see rain on it right now. So I'm wanting comfort food. I want something warm and something hearty. So when I say food, in my mind, I'm thinking soup. I don't know if you were thinking that right away, but there were lots of different categories of food that you could have thought. But even when I say soup, that's a category of food. It's organizationally more accurate, but what does it mean to be a soup? There are so many different ways of thinking about that. But once you have put things into a category, like soup is the type of food that I'm going to be making and hopefully eating later on, we try to make sense in the third step of the perception making process, the interpretation. So if something is a soup, it has to have certain qualities. We can expect certain things from it because we know that all soups have this thing. It's going to have liquid. It is going to be a broth of some sort. It could be meat-based, it could be cream-based, it could be plant-based. All of those are options, but by saying soup, we know that it's going to have liquid to it. That's what differentiates it from lots of other things, like instead of roast beef or pasta or bread. It means something to be in a category. So organizationally, we put things into categories, and then we try to make sense of what it means to have that distinction or designation or label. So, just to review, I've talked briefly about the first three processes also already. In the perception making process, we have selection, organization, and then interpretation. All of those happen internally. You can do these by yourself. But when we get to the fourth stage, negotiation, that actually involves other people. You have developed your ideas internally and you share them with others. And other people share their ideas with you, and you come to some sort of agreement. You have shared meaning. And that's the negotiation process. What do you do when you have ideas that are different than other people's? Like, you have a different version of what soup means. Well, collectively, we come together and determine what the boundaries and rules and regulations are for fitting into this category. So I'll give you another example just so it's not food related. Not everything has to be food related, even though you know that I talk about food a lot and I will continue to later. But think of all of the things in your life you organize, like the clothing that you wear. We could talk about just what it means to be clothing, but usually we have different ideas as to how to organize things when we put them away, or what it is that we need. We can talk about the functionality of clothing. You could say you have winter wear, or you have rain gear. All of those things, what does it mean to be in that category? Well, they're probably waterproof and insulated. That's one way that we would organize our clothes. We could also think about, where does it go on our body? We have things that belong on our feet. We have things that cover our torsos. We have things that we put on our heads. We have things that are designed to cover our mid-regions and our legs sometimes. All of those are categories, and there are things that belong in it. So if you say, you're buying a new top, that usually means it's going to be something like a sweater or a shirt or a blouse or a vest. We have lots of different options, but that is an organizational category. And think about what that means when you put things away. I'm always amazed when I ask people if they have an organizational scheme for their closets or dressers. And the answer is almost always yes. We put things that are similar next to other things that are similar. I think of both my closet and also my dresser. All of my socks are in the same spot. All of my t-shirts are in one spot. All of my long sleeve shirts are in another spot. My sweaters are in a different spot. The shirts that need to be on hangers because I have to iron them is one of the things I absolutely hate in life, honestly. But all of those things have a designated location. And it means something to be in that category. Not only does it mean that I have interpreted how it is that I'm going to wear things and handle them, but also where it belongs, if it's going to be, put away. So this organizational scheme plays out in lots and lots of different ways. We also relate this to the idea of communication. So some of the categories of things that we encounter regarding communication and how we have classified things. In formal settings, there are frequently speeches. And think of how similar a speech is going to be depending upon what the occasion or event is. Like if you are at a graduation ceremony, all of the speeches are going to be fairly similar. It's going to be all about recognizing the accomplishments of the people who are graduating, and bright futures are ahead. That's the nature of it. What is it if you are at a wedding? People are giving toasts or speaking during the ceremony. It's all centered around love. And the commitment that happens with marriage and happiness, hopefully. If not, I don't want to be at that wedding, honestly. But funerals are very specific. Another category is awards. One of the activities I'm going to have you do is watch a very short award acceptance speech. And if you think about what it is that we've learned to expect when we are watching award ceremonies or people receive awards, we expect very specific things. Usually there's humility. It's not, oh, I really, really deserved this, and finally I'm getting the recognition that I should have gotten years ago. We don't hear that. We hear grace and humility and appreciation. And something is a little bit wrong if organizationally and communication-wise those things don't agree. So we do this in communication, and we also think about what doesn't seem to fit well. What does it mean to be in a category? What does it mean to be part of a specific sort of group? We have assumptions, and we talk to people based on those assumptions. I think of all of the different roles that I have in life. It's like, what does it mean for me to be a college professor? Does it mean that you always have to speak in formal language, that I don't have a good sense of humor, that the movies that I watch have to be, documentaries or really highbrow? Absolutely not, but sometimes we have these perceptions about people's identities based on their roles, and we just communicate in a very specific way based on our perceptions, even if they're right or wrong. So that's a quick overview of the 4 stages that are involved, or the 4 steps of developing perceptions. We have selection, organization, interpretation, and then the 4th stage, negotiation, which involves other people when you come together and agree upon shared meanings for all of these things. So that's what we're going through. One of the other essential things to recognize is that our initial perceptions might or might not be accurate, and we have a very, very specific process that we can go through to gauge whether or not it's accurate, and that's what we're going to look at next. Stay tuned.